All right, for our final guest today, we have a leading voice from the NIH. Please welcome the director of the NIH's BRAIN Initiative, Dr. John Ngai. Dr. Ngai, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's start with an overview of what it is that you do. What is the BRAIN Initiative, and how is it different from the rest of what the NIH does?
Yeah, great question. So I have the privilege of overseeing what we call the BRAIN Initiative. BRAIN stands for Brain Research Through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies. It was launched 10 years ago, so we're celebrating our 10th year in great existence. And the reason behind this BRAIN Initiative is as follows. Your brains, our brains, are the most complex organ in the body. They're arguably the most powerful, flexible, and energy-efficient computer known to humankind. And it gives rise to everything that makes us human, everything that makes us unique as humans, but also uniquely individuals from each other. And it carries this out because of its vast complexity. There are 86 billion, with a B, neurons between your ears, twice as many what we call non-neuronal cells, and they make hundreds of trillions of connections with each other. A fascinating piece of biology, but this complexity makes it also quite vulnerable to disease. Now, we don't yet have the tools to fully understand how this marvelous computer works. The rub is 1 in 3 Americans, over 100 million humans, are living with some disorder of the brain. So think about it. Everybody in this room, you and I, we either are living with some condition that affects our nervous system, or we have a loved one or a close friend who's also affected. And for those families, for our families, cures cannot come soon enough. And the goal of the BRAIN Initiative is to develop new technologies to understand how this incredible machine works so we can figure out what goes wrong in disease and actually find cures, not just treatments, but cures.
And so how has the BRAIN Initiative changed research into Alzheimer's specifically within the NIH?
So can I give a little background?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's this amazing biological computer. So Caitlin, if I were to say, my cell phone, it's not giving me the right sound even though I give the right input. It's a computer. And I said, can you fix it for me? And I think the first thing one would do you'd want to get a parts list. What are all the components? What are all the pieces? What are the properties? How are they wired together? So you need a wiring diagram for them. And then very importantly, you need a source code. How is the information going from component to component through these wires to make these circuits? So your brain is composed of thousands and thousands, if not millions of circuits. So the goal of the BRAIN Initiative is to create these tools to understand how this 86 billion component computer works, and we're literally doing that right now. So for example, we have stood up a large project over the last 10 years that's cataloged every single cell type in the mouse brain, and we have a draft atlas of all the cell types in human brains. So that's a parts list. There's probably at least 5,000 cell types in the mouse brain that we've identified molecularly. We know their properties. 3,000 and counting in the human brain. So that's a parts list. You need a wiring diagram. We're standing up the technologies to give a full wiring diagram of the mouse and human brains. And then we're also developing tools to develop the source code. So how does that impact our study of Alzheimer's disease? So you may be aware of, you also heard earlier this morning, about the first disease-modifying therapies for Alzheimer's, these amazing monoclonal antibodies that are given to patients who are starting to show signs of cognitive decline. So they're already in kind of going down this cascade. But these are just treatments. They slow the progression, they don't stop it, and the effects, admittedly, are modest. And what we need to get at the earlier events. So using these incredible tools that we developed in the BRAIN Initiative to catalog all these cell types in the brain. And I should mention that the technologies we used over the last 10 years have gotten over between 50 and 100-fold more efficient. Wow. So forget Moore's Law. We've broken Moore's Law a long time ago, okay? And what this has allowed us to do is stand up the technologies to support a project called the Seattle Alzheimer's Disease Project. It's funded by the National Institute on Aging, but it's based on BRAIN Initiative technology, led by folks at the Allen Institute and the University of Washington. And what they did is they studied a large cohort of patients at different stages of the disease. And they looked at not just the end stage where you have plaques, you have tangles, but across the entire spectrum from early to late. And what they found by looking at the cells that are affected in the disease, they found two phases that wasn't appreciated before. An early, quiescent, kind of slow phase. Patients had moderate, if any, symptoms. And then a second half where you see this inexorable progression to severe dementia. Okay? So we heard earlier this focus on inflammation. That's certainly, they picked up, certainly the cells that are involved in inflammation and other changes. But unexpectedly, they found a particular cell type that was lost very early in the game, before there were really any symptoms. Now, this is one cell type out of maybe 3,000 or 5,000. This is how good our techniques are. And when that gives us, it gives us a target. So now we have cells, we know they're lost. We think that if you lose these cells, like, they're gonna kind of matter. And we know what those cells are expressing in terms of genes, receptors, proteins, and now we have something we can pinpoint to target. So this is our contribution to accelerating discovery toward cures, not just treatments.
Yeah, so just connect the dots. Why does it matter to have that early stage target when it comes to actually coming up with some kind of treatment?
Right, so right now we have treatments that are disease modifying, but they come late in the game.
Right.
And I think we can all see that the damage has already been done. A lot of focus has been on these amyloid plaques, definitely playing a role. There's a new appreciation for tau tangles, definitely play a role. But what if we can get at the early events before all this damage happens, maybe in that early quiet phase? Then we have a chance of prevention, right? Or maybe even a cure. So our basic tenet is you can't fix what you don't understand, right? So if we know the parts, if we know why they're going wrong, and if we have a way of intervening in them, we have a chance of stopping this thing in its tracks. And that's the goal. I can't tell you when it's going to happen, but it's really giving us mechanistic insight into how we might approach this problem in a different way. It's going to take more than one approach to solve this public health crisis in Alzheimer's and the related dementias and other neurodegenerative disorders.
So your work obviously extends beyond Alzheimer's.
Yes.
There's a few treatment modes out there that I'll just say sound unreal almost these days. So a couple of things that I know the Brain Initiative has been involved in is brain stimulation,
right,
and then brain-computer interfaces.
Right.
Can you tell us about some of the advancements and what we're learning about in those
Love
areas?
to. So the work I've been talking about so far is what we call basic fundamental research. Our goal is to provide the tools and resources, the knowledge that we need to push the field forward in translation and ultimately into clinical care. But we're helping people now, which is really cool. So, I mentioned we need a parts list, we need a wiring diagram. We need to be able to understand what's going on in the circuits in your brain. Now, many of the disorders of the central nervous system, neurologic conditions, neuropsychiatric conditions, they are problems of circuits. The wiring, something happened with the wiring. They're not necessarily visible to us. We can't pinpoint a gene on it, but we can pinpoint activity on these circuits. So I think most of you have probably heard about deep brain stimulation. It's been around for decades now to treat folks with Parkinson's disease. It helps control their motor symptoms, tremors and what have you. And so that's been around for quite a while. About 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, people had this idea that, well, maybe we can extend this to more complex disorders, neuropsychiatric disorders. For example, severe depression, which can and does lead to suicide. Severe obsessive compulsive disorder, which is really truly debilitating. Post-traumatic stress disorder, binge eating disorder, substance use disorder, huge public health crisis for us. And on the flip side of that is chronic pain. So what can we learn about these brain circuits that are underlying these disorders? And can we literally help stimulate people back into a better state, right?
Right.
So the cool thing is, with better tools of mapping these circuits, with better ways of recording brain activity from patients, and then being able to take this jumble of activity. I've looked at these traces. You look, it's like a mess, right? But with advanced AI algorithms, researchers are able to make sense of this mess, and they're able to correlate certain patterns with different mood states, okay? And then we can go in and we can literally stimulate patients into a better state. I've talked to some of these patients. It's amazing. When they couldn't even get out of bed, when they just couldn't think about going on living, going through these therapies, they have their life back. They have their families back. And they're contributing to society and to their own sense of worth. And this was science fiction 10 years ago, and it's being applied to as these conditions: severe depression, OCD, PTSD, binge eating disorder, substance use disorder. We now have what we call these brainwave biomarkers for chronic pain, and early studies are showing that when we can stimulate these patients back into a better state. So the sky's the limit right now, and we're just really excited to see this happening. Again, what was science fiction 10 years ago is reality today, and we're looking forward to doing that in the next 10 years.
A little more science fiction, the brain-computer interfaces.
Yes, yes.
What's kind of the most exciting thing happening in that area?
Yeah, so there's great stuff going on related to the deep brain stimulation studies that I just told you about that are relying on being able to read out this brainwave activity and turn it into something useful, actionable. So you probably have seen, or you might even know somebody who's been either had a spinal cord injury, stroke, living with ALS. They're paralyzed. They can't, some of these individuals, they can't communicate, they can't talk. They're cognitively fine, but they're unable to communicate. And this is what we call so-called locked-in syndrome, which is really devastating. And so we funded a number of researchers who have been able to figure out what are the brainwave activities that drive, for example, speech, or the ability to imagine numbers or letters, and to decode that information to drive what we call a brain-computer interface neural prosthesis. So you've heard about prosthetic devices. This is one that actually takes brain activity and drives it into either text or speech. And this has been going on. It's amazing stuff. We had a recent example from a group at University of California, Davis, funded by actually one of our institutes, the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, but based on technology that Brain has been building over the last 10 years. And they have a patient, a human research participant. He's in his 40s. He has ALS. He's locked in. He's what we call anarthic. He can't talk, but he can try to enunciate the words and letters. And they placed 4 electrodes on the part of his brain, the motor cortex that drives speech, and they had that drive an artificial neural network, a very fancy AI algorithm. They still haven't told me exactly what the magic sauce was, but and then they had it drive a speech synthesizer. Now the cool thing is, there's 2 cool things. One is that this gentleman is a climate activist. He's very active. He's done a lot of video shows and what have you. They took his videos and they were able to have this drive not just a speech synthesizer like you might have heard through watching films of Stephen Hawking, but it's in his own voice. So that was one big thing. The other big thing was they were able to tune this artificial neural network so it's literally plug and play. Within an hour and a half of training, he could literally converse with you.
Wow.
And I've seen the clips of this. You have to have a box of tissue next to you. It's just so moving. It's life-changing. For the time he has left with us, he's able to live a full life. He's able to talk to his daughter. He's able to actually have Zoom calls with his colleagues and continue driving the passion that he has as a human while he's with us.
That sounds amazing. Unfortunately, we can't hear any more because we are out of time. We can't wait to learn more about what the Brain Initiative is doing in future years. It's so interesting and cutting edge. But Dr. Ngai, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And